So Anthony Blinken was talking about Russia and Ukraine and what's going on there now, and he said something that really caught my eye about what Russia might do next.
We've warned about the possibility of so-called false flag operations, that is, Russia manufacturing a provocation and then justifying anything it does in terms of responding to this manufactured provocation.
So the U.S. is concerned about false flag attacks. Now, look, is it possible? Sure. Putin's amassed up to 100,000 troops on the border of Ukraine, and it looks like he's probably going to invade. He took over Crimea in 2014. He went into Georgia during the Bush years. It's very possible. The part that they don't tell you is the history of NATO and how when the Soviet Union broke up and we created the post-Soviet states, they were supposed to be a buffer between Europe and Russia. And ever since then, even though we gave Russia our word, NATO will not get closer to your border, we've creeped closer and closer and closer to their border. So from the Russian perspective, they view that as aggression on the part of the West. That's the part of the story that you're not told. Now, again, it is possible that they do some sort of false flag thing and then go in, but my guess is even if they go in, which is very likely, they'll limit it to just the ethnically Russian areas, similar to what they did in Crimea. Because they know if they go to the ethnic Ukrainian areas, then there will be vicious fighting, and if there's vicious fighting, then you drag in the West, and then you're off to the races, and it could be World War III. Okay. So it's possible he does some sort of false flag, Putin does, to get us to that point, but it's so funny hearing the U.S. now. This is the first time, and maybe the last time, any U.S. government officials will ever bring up even the notion of a false flag attack. Because they would call that conspiracy theory if you ever say it in regards to them, even though we know the U.S. government does false flag attacks and has done them a number of times. Classic example, Operation Northwoods. That was a proposed false flag operation against American citizens that originated with the U.S. Department of Defense in 1962, and the proposal called for CIA operatives to stage and commit acts of terrorism against the American military and civilian targets, and then blame it on the Cuban government. And they were going to use that as a justification for war against Cuba. And they say, reading the ever-trusty Wikipedia page on this, they say, the possibilities detailed in the document included the possible assassination of Cuban immigrants, sinking boats of Cuban refugees on the high seas, hijacking planes to be shot down or given the appearance of being shot down, blowing up a U.S. ship, and orchestrating violent terrorism in U.S. cities. The proposals were rejected by then President John F. Kennedy. And by the way, Kennedy eventually wound up dead. Then you have the Gulf of Tonkin incident. The Gulf of Tonkin was used in Vietnam as a reason to escalate and do a full-scale ground invasion. So they say about that, the outcome of these two incidents, there were two separate Gulf of Tonkin incidents. One of them was real. The second one was made up by the U.S. It was a false flag to get us more involved in Vietnam. The outcome of these two incidents was the passage by U.S. Congress of the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which granted U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson the authority to assist any Southeast Asian country whose government was considered to be jeopardized by, quote, communist aggression. The resolution served as Johnson's legal justification for deploying U.S. conventional forces and the commencement of open warfare against North Vietnam. So in other words, classic psychological projection is what's being done here by Blinken. They might do a false flag attack because that's something they would do. We have a history of doing false flag attacks. Now, again, I don't put it beyond Russia. I'm not one of these lefties who thinks that as long as you posture against American imperialism, you're, like, by definition, benign. No. There's also Chinese imperialism and Russian imperialism, and any large state that has too much power can become imperialistic, of course. So I don't put it beyond them, but it is hilarious that the pot is calling the kettle black here. Because there's been no real reckoning with our own history of false flag attacks, and I'm sure there's still conversations and talks about it going on now. Doing stuff along those lines today. We haven't evolved out of it. This idea that, like, well, now the CIA doesn't meddle in other countries when they used to. Really? Who's naive enough to believe that? I mean, some people are. It's probably the pervasive view in mainstream media, but leftists aren't naive enough to believe that. Like, oh, the CIA sort of cleaned up their act. I believe that. What? No, not at all. So we'll see what happens with Ukraine, but this will probably be the first and last time you ever hear some U.S. official bringing up a false flag attack. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.